Welcome to the Woven Energy Podcast on real practical shamanism with me, Joseph Sikora, and as always, Damon Smith. We are here once again to talk about shamanism from the ground up. So, in this episode, we are continuing on pretty much directly from our last episode, and we're also going deep into stage 4 currently of shamanic technique. So this week I've been trying to think of a succinct sentence or two to kind of sum up what we were doing. I talked to you as well, Damon, about it, just trying to come up with something for the title. And we came up with maintaining the energy thread, which can kind of mean anything. So hopefully it makes a bit of sense if you've listened to the episode. So what I thought we could do to start this episode is very briefly, do a little bit of a recap of where we got to last episode and then launch straight into this episode. What do you think?
Sure. So, you're going to make me bleeding pronounce Hatamach Welsh, aren't you, again? Let's just call it threading. Shall we just call it threading from now on? The thread of the weave. So, we were...
Oh, that was another one, threading the weave. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's what eventually goes on to create the weave, but it's about developing an awareness or developing the ability to maintain threads of energy. That's pretty much the start of level 4. And that all comes out of your hard practice on level 3, being able to make movements that continuously embrace the aspects of, so a lot of the aspects of physical chillicity. So, for instance, Asaakh, the vessel-like form, which, you know, in the kind of spirit dance that I do, tends to go between these two extreme positions, the Torrent, which is the big embracing position, and Havtas, which is like the folded wings position, the most closed position and the most open position, the most closed position, if you like. And then the various other aspects of physical chillicity, for instance, the springiness of the body, the constant store of energy, like in it being a bow that's under tension constantly. I mean, like as in a bow and arrow, numlach. And then you have the idea that you're sliding along under nature, or there's like the blanket of nature over you. That's the murch. Or muruch, sorry. That's like, it's sometimes the hardest one to talk about, but this is part of the aspects of the physical chillicity within the spirit dance. The Negdekh is a part of the same kind of idea, where what's going on is hidden, but is not. What's going on within your body is hidden, but it's not separate. It's still there. It still has a presence. That's the Negdekh. And then there's the Ashquid that we talked about a lot. That's that sort of lightness and heaviness combined. The flesh kind of hanging on the bones like a structure. Yeah. So out of your practice of level 3 technique, if you're going down the spirit dance route, obviously many times we've said there are other routes. There's drum and
we'll do an episode on that. We will do an episode on that.
Probably more than one, mate. Probably more than one. So, but even if you do go down other routes, this level 4 is pretty much the same. Level 3 is different in terms of the physical practicalities of the techniques that you're applying, but level 4 is still about threads of energy. It's still about the weave, the gurch. So you are maintaining physical chillicity with movement while preserving the amskar, the lightweight observation of self. That's how to observe yourself, the skill that you learn at level 2, how to observe yourself without interfering with the natural processes that go on in your body, especially things like your heart rate and your breathing.
Yeah.
You are internalizing increasing numbers over time, and we talked about why I think the best way to do that is one new dance technique or category of dance techniques at a time, internalize them until you don't have to think about it, and then free link them, or allow them to arise in a spontaneous kind of way as you're practicing your spirit dance. And through all of that, if you maintain the physical chillicity and you stay in a state of chillicity, you level 4, these threads of energy is what arises out of that. An awareness of these threads of energy comes through your Amska, through your level 2, within level 4. And so last time we were talking about how those threads manifest themselves in a very basic kind of way, how to maintain them. They extend ahead of you and back behind you within the dance. So that's the basics of how to thread. And we talked about this idea of a cloud of bees or something around your body.
Yeah.
For the idea that the human body, although it has various disparate parts, when you maintain physical chillicity, and this is the reason for the physical chillicity, can create, it doesn't have to, but can create a single primary energy thread within the dance. Now, that thread can be incredibly complicated and it weave in and out of itself, and that's more advanced kind of stuff within level 4. But the bottom line is it can, a whole human body can have a single primary thread that is maintained from the beginning to the end of the dance, and should be maintained from the beginning of the end of the dance. And one of the ways you could sort of visualize this is if you were to take a video of yourself in the dark and, I don't know, attach a torch to your chest or something like that, and then just do your spirit dance for like 5-10 minutes while continuously having the shutter on the camera open.
Yeah, continuous exposure.
See that kind of... That's not the thread. That would just be a light on your chest being recorded, but that would give an idea of what that thread might be like. Although it's an internal physiological thread. It's not an external light source.
Yeah, and it's been interesting because if you were doing it properly, you'd see it just move in circles, spirals. You would never see a cut. You would see something like a continuous momentum, right? Because I can't shake this word out of my head, momentum. It's like, is that a good word to use? Momentum. Just keep that momentum going.
Momentum's a good word for the level 3, but at level 4, we're a bit beyond that. Yeah, we're talking about the energy patterns.
Yeah,
that are, if you like, maintaining or affecting the momentum of the physical body. But the momentum of the body is only one aspect that they're affecting. They're affecting your heart rate. They're affecting your breathing. They're affecting all of the physiological processes within your body. I would assume my feeling is that they're affecting other systems within your body as well, the endocrine system and, various others. Certainly, this kind of practice can have a buoyant aspect to it. So I presume they're affecting things like endorphins and the neurological system and things like this as well. But of course, we're not dissecting this in a scientific way. What we're trying to do is get a holistic, practical, experiential understanding of what's actually going on within the dance. And the first thing you need to be able to do within level 4 is get a good sense of that primary energy thread that threads throughout the dance and stands from beginning to end, and is sort of there before you start and sort of still there after you finish, the weave that you're creating through your dance. And that's the kind of the first skill level. And then obviously that energy thread is then subsequently affected by other changes that you do. What you're doing in effect in spirit dance is you are mirroring the creation of the universe. You're mirroring the underlying law, LORE, of the universe and the way in which the universe works. You're mirroring the energy patterns that make the galaxies work and the planets and nature and the seas and the sky and all that, all those recurring energy patterns that we see in nature, whirlpools and tornadoes, and would be examples of kind of Gaia, Negdekh, that there would be examples of that type of a change going on within nature. And we also have sort of spiral galaxies and this type of stuff. And you would also see examples in nature of energy streams coming together like two rivers in confluence. You would see things like the movements, or the rolling movements within clouds, which kind of like Tsotolun, another energy change. So you see recurring patterns within nature, and you're trying to reflect those. It's a bit like the sort of esoteric concept of as above, so below, the macrocosm and the microcosm. You are reflecting in your dance the way in which the universe works, or embracing the way in which the universe works. And obviously through the experience of the environment that you're moving through, you're also starting, this is the first level at which you're starting to gain teaching from the natural environment that you're in. And this is why you start off with a fairly simple environment. Maybe just walking in a straight line is how you start. Then maybe you start to circle around your grove, and then maybe you start to plunge into the trees, as I love doing. Some of the people who've met up, some patrons and co met up for me will know about me plunging into the trees. It's
plunging into the trees.
It's a joy, mate. It's a joy. So basically, what you do, you start to study spirit dance in open spaces, but there's a lot more to be learned through studying them in spaces where there are natural, you call them natural obstacles if you want, natural attractors within the environment, trees, bushes, brambles, those nettles, all those kind of things. They are all natural attractors within physical environments. And the more you get into spirit dance, the more you want to be in the densely packed, with a lot of variety of nature within the environment you're doing it, or within the surf, moving around in the surf at the beach. You want more of that kind of thing, or in a cave, following the cave wall or whatever, feeling the bark on trees, this kind of stuff. You want more and more of that kind of stuff in your spirit dance. Naturally you do. It's not that that you have to go out and think, well, that's the stuff I've got to do. It's just you generate a desire for that kind of dancing as part of nature rather than dancing as separate from nature. Does that make some kind of sense?
Yeah. One thing that you said through the week, or is it you or was it me getting it mixed up? But we were talking and this phrase, creating your universe, came up, or creating a universe. Me. So how does that reconcile with you saying that we mirror the universe, or we become part of what is already there? Because I don't want to get confused with the term creating a universe with imagination. So
yeah, I didn't actually say create a whole universe. It's you create your own part of this universe. Yeah. So the issue is that you're genuinely creating something, but driven by this universe. So it's not really you that's creating it. It's the universe is creating a part of itself through you as a vessel. And that's the whole idea of Chillicity, is to become a vessel for nature through which nature can create. Yeah, that's the general idea behind it. So that's pretty much what we're talking about last time. And that's a lot of practice to get a good sense of that energy thread that runs throughout these things. Now, don't get me wrong, you can create multiple energy threads. You can create a lot of different energy threads, but the key point is, as the basics of spirit dance, there is a thread that runs through your dance. That's inevitable, and it can split and it can rejoin, and various other things can happen with it, but it's just having an awareness of that thread and what it's doing in a level 2 type of awareness of that thread and what it's doing is the basics, is starting off. And also obviously maintaining the thread, which you referred to. You don't want Tyrak here. Tyrak's important.
Cut. Yeah.
Yeah, your Tyrak's important. But just like that with that thing, if you stopped with that for a minute with that light on your chest and you had a long exposure photograph being taken, there would be a brighter light at that point in time to show where you'd stopped moving. You don't want that so much, unless it's, as nature takes you, and that is one of the changes that occurs within nature. Energy streams do sever each other on occasion, but it shouldn't be the dominant be all and end all. The shamaness Miki, when she taught about this stuff, she taught those things, those two, what would be in Mongol, what would be Tyrak and Tengiz, Shad and Mir in our, excuse me, in our Amabella terminology. She taught those as extremes. They are things that come out of nature when some kind of excess happens, some sort of excess of energy happens within a certain system. That system may be your energy dance, or your spirit dance, and they are things that nature naturally uses to deal with excess. So they are not things. So you can think of them like a safety valve, or like what they call that little valve that goes on the top of a pressure cooker, where the pressure gets too high and they have a safety valve. You can think of Tyrak and Tingis as having that type of application in support of each other. So, and they are important in nature. How do you think the dinosaurs went extinct? That was shard, right? And maybe there's a human race is going to go extinct the same way, with global warming,
with the way
and all
things
the
are
other
going.
nonsense we're doing.
Yes.
We may end up Tyraking ourselves. We do, as a species, we do seem to like Tyrak, but it's not the foundation of nature. And so I think the next thing in terms of where you would move from once you've developed a good sense of that thread is to start introducing some much more common changes into the threading of your dance. And of course, some of the techniques, they naturally lend themselves to this. So I mean, for instance, just the two basic extreme end positions that I use, the Haftas and the Tirelt, those things, if you switch between those, you naturally will start introducing Shurug, for instance. You can't avoid it. Shurug is like rising and falling, coming and going. It's the waves breaking on the beach and then rolling back down the beach and coming over again. It's those natural compression and expansion going away and coming back sort of cycles that you always see within nature.
Squall and Gaia.
That's squall. That's Shurug. Yeah.
Shurug squall. Okay, so I get it. We're going to be talking about the quote unquote trigrams from the Mongolian perspective.
We're going to talk about the changes. We're going to talk about the changes not from the Mongolian perspective, because the perspective is identical. We're going to be using Mongol words and Armabella terms to talk about changes within nature. It just so happens that there is this Chinese categorization system for changes within nature, which people call the trigrams, that can also be used to understand those changes. But the fundamental canonical reference for those changes is nature herself. It is absolutely not some Chinese book, or indeed any Mongolian book or anything like that, or
so to get these energy changes across, we'll use the two words so we can at least communicate and understand what page we're on. So we've got the Mongolian term, but also the Armabella term, because I think the Armabella terms are useful in a sense that they give a flavor of the
they're a lot
energy
easier
change.
To pronounce.
They're a lot easier to pronounce, but they also give that kind of flavor. You say the word shard and you get it. You understand. Okay, I kind of get a flavor of what that means. So
now
they're quite helpful with those terms, I think.
The reason that you came up with Negdekh, Gaia, when I was talking about squall, Shurug, is that these things often work in pairs, and that is one of the primary pairings. That Shurug and Negdekh are one of the primary pairings. Now, the terms in Japanese for this pairing that the great shamaness Miki, whose tradition you can probably tell I've studied in an awful lot of detail, she used the term Futatsu Atotsu for those pairings, which literally means two in one. They're sort of two separate energy changes, but in a way, they're one pattern of change. So, and in Chinese, it's He Yi. So the point is that they work in pairs. So the first pair that I'd really like to talk about is not Squall and Gaia, Shurug and Negdekh. It's Tolhgor and Negdekh. These are the to me, they're the foundational ones. They're the ones I like to talk about first. They're the ones that Miki talked about first. They are, if you want to understand them in terms of the Chinese classification system, this is all of the yangs. So if you have a trigram is made up of 3 lines, so this would be yang, yang, yang. You always read them from the base up with the Chinese trigrams. And so that'd be Tolhgor or Jag, and Negdekh is yin, 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 which is Meld in Armabella terminology, Negdekh. So So what we're talking about here is in the Chinese classification system, the trigrams, they are the exact polar opposites of each other. You reverse every line, you get the Ahur-yi counterpart of that line. And so Jag is about one energy stream supporting or containing another. So, for instance, one of the ways that you see that is just simply structurally in your posture. When you make that great tereal position, it's a huge, especially when you've got strong ashqui, it's an amazingly strongly supportive position. Every bone, every ligament is in really good circular alignment or spherical alignment with every other bone. In your fingers, your wrists, your forearms, your elbows, your shoulders, your chest, your torso, your legs, your knees, your ankles, your head. Everything is forming that vessel, is forming that chalice that we name chalicity after. And everything mutually supports everything else. Every part mutually supports everything else. So this is also true of the energy weave that runs through your dance. At all times, if you do it well, that energy thread is mutually supporting every part of the thread that's ahead of you in the dance and every part of you that's behind you in the dance. And when you, for instance, when you turn a corner, where you go around your groove, when you circle around your groove, the impetus of the energy stream that is behind you is supporting that energy stream that is building or threading out in front of you as you go around that corner. Now, that's the idea of Tolhgor. Now, Negdekh is very similar.
Can I just ask, would robustness be a fairly good word to use in the way that the way that you structure yourself in your body and through these movements? There's a connection between everything, and like you feel robust as you do it.
So yes, but I would say that has to be in place. That's like the bat. It's like the physical chalicity that needs to be in place. So that's sort of level 1, level 2. It has to be there, or you're not going to be doing very much with your level 3, level 4 technique. So I'd say it's a kind of prerequisite. But what I'm talking about here is energy streams or energy threads that support themselves through time, if you like. So if you want to think of the 3 realms, the creative realm, the manifest realm, and the receptive realm, as you do the dance, you're totally in the manifest realm. But the creative realm and the receptive realm, so the receptive realm is the thread, the support of the thread that's behind you. It's what has gone before. And the creative realm is that thread out in the future that nature is laying out for you, that you're following to build the future. That's the creative realm. And that's also supporting the thread that is running through you temporarily in the manifest realm. Does that make some kind of sense?
That makes a lot of sense.
Mutual support. This is the Jag. This is the mutual support of those energy lines. So nothing new really is being created. And this is why we were having a discussion during the week about what we were going to title the previous episode. And we were going to talk about generating energy threads or something like that. And we sort of came to the conclusion that was probably going to be a bit misleading. Yeah. Because the energy threads are sort of there. They're not really generated at all. They are there. And they sort of stand if you do your spirit dance quite nicely. Incidentally, coming up on the Heretics podcast, we have a review of a piece of music that's sort of shamanistic in character, and we're talking about this same kind of concept in a musical way. And cool. So yeah, you got that one to look out for.
Yeah.
So the issue here is that support, you want to develop the ability of having the thread behind you supporting your thread and the thread in front of you, which are all the same thread, effectively. But the the supportive aspect is important, or your thread will just run off somewhere else and no longer be part of what you're doing. It'll go off. It won't be destroyed. It'll be off into nature, and But in terms of your learning experience, that ongoing mutual support, think of this weave that you're building with your energy thread as your radar for nature. Obviously, you don't want your radar to flash on for a second and then it's gone again. Ideally, it's there at all times, building a picture of nature, or you building it through nature. And what we've said that shamanism is all about, it's about putting nature in the seat of your teacher. This is the radar through which you're ultimately going to gain that learning, that understanding of the world, that nature's going to bring to you. And you want that overall weave that you're building to have that mutual support running all the way through it, so that you can have yet another Mongol word, I do apologize, hasha, which is a kind of encirclement or an enclosure of the space that's created through the weave that's produced with the energy thread of your dance. The hasha is, as I said, it's a standing thing. And the whole of the hasha, not just the bit that you're temporarily in right now at any given point in the dance, the whole of the hasha is your radar for nature's teaching. That's the idea. So, and obviously the Ahai, the Futatsu Totsu, the 2-in-1 pair of Tolhgor is Negdekh, which is all the yins in Chinese understanding, Meld in Amabella terminology. That's about confluence. It can be two energy lines coming into one, which we were sort of talking about last time with a practical exercise that I did was, lead with the right side of the body. So I was talking about having one side of the body in Torrent and the other side in Haftas, and then switching from one to the other. The thing that stops there being a break in the middle of that transition, that stops there being a Tyrak in the middle of that and keeps the one thread going, is Negdekh. It's that joining confluence. It's two things into one. People who are interested in martial arts might like to try this with sort of, two full power punches with a single, if you're moving forward with two full power punches, but a single momentum impetus behind those two punches, what I mean is you're hitting a heavy bag or something. You can plunge two punches into that bag. It's a very simplistic way of understanding it in momentum terms. There's no break between them in the energy transmission of your body moving forwards into those punches, but they are physically, they're two separate punches, but they are one energy flow that can be made one energy through the application of Negdekh. That's the idea. And this is the same in your dance. So that's why I said that you can have multiple streams of energy and will have multiple streams of energy going on in your dance. But through the application of Negdekh in your dance, there is always one overarching stream, or there's generally one overarching stream unless you create, usually deliberately, because what I find is naturally my body doesn't want to do that, doesn't want to generate multiple large-scale energy streams. Sometimes it does, but that's more of like a rare learning. But if I'm creating an energy thread, it tends to be that the dance nature wants to maintain that. Maybe that's just my personal experience, but I think some other shamans have had that experience. I mean, Miki, for instance, other shamans have had that experience as well. So I wouldn't like to say it's universal because every shaman has to find their own way. I'm not telling you what you're going to learn through this. That's not really anybody's job to do that. It's on you as a shamanic practitioner to practice this stuff and find out what nature has to teach you. And as Joe mentioned, always keep in mind the imagination trap. You don't want to be imagining this stuff. You don't imagine the golden thread that you're painting through the air.
Or the swarm of bees following you around.
That's more like a post-analysis type of thing. It's a sort of thing to start imagining after you've done it, not beforehand. So I probably shouldn't have mentioned it, but, give the idea. So And the thing with imagination trap is the human brain is very, very good at imagining things that don't exist. That's one of the reasons we've been very successful as a species, and there's nothing wrong with it. In some contexts, we talked about flint napping. You can make people with the skill can make some very impressive tools doing flint napping. They have to be able to imagine that tool inside the flint before they start napping the bits of flint off it to make that tool. Some very beautiful tools can be made by skilled people, but that's not that's the very, very good human skill that we're not trying to use here. That's the point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the thing is, what you want, that especially that energy line that runs in front of you, you want nature to decide that, not you decide that. That's the key point. If you find yourself deciding that too much, then just try a bit more plunging into trees. The great thing about being in thick, densely packed underbrush is that if you start deciding that too much, you're going to get ripped to pieces by the brambles. You're going to go running into trees, whacking your head off branches and all that kind of stuff. Let nature decide. That's the key point. So that's
Jag is like your support, and
yes,
just to succinctly wrap it up, I know that's very difficult, but support. And then Meld is sort of if there's multiple energy threads, it's about maintaining a single one and melding them into one, melding these multiple energy threads into one to maintain a single weave.
Exactly.
Oh, good. Oh, I'm impressed. I was expecting you to go, no, Joseph.
No, that's right. That's right. I mean, they're two of the aspects of these changes, but these changes occur in nature, and you can have you can give analogies for them within nature. Mickey's famous analogies for the two was Jag's like a pit prop, right? It's like, you want to dig into a mountain. You start digging a tunnel through the mountain. There's the chance that stuff that's up above you while you're digging along is going to come down on your head. So stick a pit prop in. It's a physical description of Jag. And in terms of Meld, you talked about your skin, right? Your skin sort of holds you together, right? Without your skin, you're a bunch of disparate parts, so they're going to go flopping around all very.
Yeah, well, that's harking at the one that you told us right back in the day when we first started learning about the flavors of these energies. Jag is your structure, your bones, what holds you together, and then the Meld is the skin, the tendons, and the muscles, and what kind of allows you to move within the structural bones and the density of that.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the way I always imagined it in my head.
So the best thing is just to experience these things, and like I say, if you get your structure right, we keep working on those aspects of physical chillicity that we've talked about before, and you internalize your dance movements, your spirit dance movements, to the point where you don't have to think about them. And you can do this lot in a state of chillicity, and you get that lightweight observation of self that's going on within Amskert, extending throughout your level 4 technique. It's going to be, especially if you get the aspects of physical chillicity right, it's going to be very hard not to experience Jag and Meld in your dance, because in a way, those 5 aspects of physical chillicity sort of force you into experiencing Jag and Meld through your dance. That's one of the reasons why they're there. So that's the first 2. The next 2, typically, that I talk about, and again, this is, I just use Mickey's order. There's no order to these things, but I just use Mickey's order, are Tsotolun and Asaakh. Tsotolun is Torrent in Amabel terminology. And that would be a yin baseline, a yang midline, and a yin top line. And the idea of Torrent is kind of mutual support, but it's also a taking of strength or position within an energy stream, adding energy into or building a pre-existing energy stream, but also one direction supporting another. So, if you are turning your energy stream, you're turning in one direction, but in a way, the other direction is mutually supporting the direction in which you're moving in. It's putting more weight into your thread line. And this is a really hard one to talk about. But sometimes this is described as, my Tai Chi teacher describes this as the needle in the cotton. The way to think about it, it has a sharpness to it, but it's a very soft sharpness. So in terms of the energy expression, so if you think of imagine you've got a ball of cotton in your hands, and it's very soft, a big ball of cotton, it's very soft, and it's all nice feeling. But in the middle of it is a needle. And then you compress the cotton. If you compress the cotton, you experience the sharpness that is already there, but you weren't aware of when you were just sensing the cotton by itself. So Torrent can be very forceful. And, we called it Torrent. It's Tolhgor in Mongol, but it's Tsotolun in Mongol. But we called it Torrent because the idea of that sort of raging torrent coming down a river and busting through a dam, that kind of thing, it can be a very forceful thing. It's putting more weight into the line.
Amplifying an existing energy stream, right?
Yes, amplifying one or more existing threads. That's pretty much what it is. Yeah, trust Joe to come up with an audio explanation of it. But yeah, it's like turning the volume up. Turning the volume up. Yeah?
Yeah.
So, and that's true irrespective of the path. That's what I'm talking about, one direction supporting another, which is sort of the activity of jag within the torrent. That jag is the needle within the cotton. Yeah. If you look at the yin yang symbol, the Tai Chi symbol, it's the white dot within the eye of the black yin fish, if you like, in the yin yang symbol. Mm. It's the sharpness of the energy presented in a very yin, soft kind of way by nature. A lovely mountain stream would look very pretty with waterfalls and stuff like this, but when there's been a heavy rain up on the mountain, sooner or later, you're going to experience that needle in the cotton. That thing's going to come raging down the hill, bust through the lovely little dam that you've made, or, the log that you've put through over the stream to cross it. And unfortunately, if you're crossing it at just that moment, it could be bad, Where I live, one of the most famous guys down here is Francis Drake. He lived in Plymouth, which is just down the road from me. And there's this famous story about him. They created a leat, which was to bring water to Plymouth, like a channel for water. And when they opened the sluice gates to let the water down the leat, it came like a bit of a mini tidal wave coming down the leat. And famously, to announce it to everybody, Francis Drake, he rode his horse ahead of the raging wall of water, shouting warnings to people as it made its way down the leat towards Plymouth. Whether this is true or not, I don't know. But what I do know is Drake is a very, very famous guy around here. First guy to, I believe Magellan, first famous guy to make it around the world alive. I believe Magellan's body made it around the world ahead of him, but I think Drake was the first guy to make it all the way around the world and still be living. But of course, there were a bunch of people on his crew who did as well, but he was the only famous one, so they probably didn't count, And there were probably some guys on Magellan's crew who made it around alive as well, but quite interesting. So that's the idea. Just think of Francis Drake riding ahead of the torrent. That is so your experience of that in spirit dance is where you get that kind of quickening going on, which naturally builds in the dance, your heart rate, especially if you dance into your heart rate, and there's a virtuous cycle. The heart rate builds the dance, and then it becomes more and more and more, and that's classic torrent, that quickening in the dance. You've been sort of being led by your heart if you're projecting your amska into the dance that you're doing. It's a very, very nice thing. It's a very enjoyable thing. I love that quickening, and that is a great example of torrent. So Kindle, Asaakh, is the opposite of that. It's the two in one. So if we reverse all those lines, yin baseline becomes yang baseline, yang midline becomes yin midline, yin top line becomes yang top line. So it's yang baseline, yin midline, yang top line. This is Asaakh. This is introducing new energy to the system. Now, remember, you can't introduce new energy to the universe. The overall system is the universe, and that's definitely not your job. Nature is trying to teach you through your spirit dance, so you want to be putting new energy into the dance under the guidance of the natural world, the natural environment that you're moving through. And how do you pick up that guidance? Well, it's the practice of your weave that you're creating. You're ultimately trying to become Yatlafwi, which is undifferentiated from nature. And through that, you start to get impetus from the natural world through time. This is the level 4s. This is where we're trying to allow that to guide the energy patterns that we're putting in the dance. Kindle is the appearance of new energy, but it's not really you. Often you're taking energy from nature, especially that happens a lot. I find that happens a lot with this Tolhgor position, which is why I love it so much. Which is incidentally on this upcoming episode on heretics, we talk about that. There's a video to go with this song, this shamanistic song, and the girl in the video does the Tolhgor position, which is one of the reasons why we're doing a review of that song. It's kind of a music review. But very often that's like I call it like nature's Hoover. It's a real great position to embrace what's going on within your natural environment. If you're dancing around with your eyes closed, or a veil on or something like that, which incidentally is also in that music video, your arm runs into a tree and then the tree can naturally guide you around itself. That's very, very easy when you're in that Tolhgor position because your arms are right out, right? So if you're dancing with somebody else, you're two shaman spirit dance, you can cross arms with each other and then each one gives an impetus to the movement of the other. This is the idea of Kindle. You take something from somewhere and introduce it to make your weave more interesting, to make your pattern more flavoursome. And it naturally will if you become that radar for nature. Nature is a complex thing. There's a lot of stuff going on, even in seemingly simple environments. Like out on the beach is probably the simplest one I practice in. Seemingly, it's just sand, right? But there's the surf. That's why I like to be in the surf, not literally up on the beach. I like to be down in it. And then the sound of the waves and the seagulls and everything, the wind and that wonderful air that you get at the side of the ocean or the sea. All that stuff is an influence upon you. The sun or the moon, if you're out at night or whatever, all those things are influences upon you.
It's so easy to forget about all that stuff and just ignore it. But when you're when you're just sat on the beach or looking at the beach, there's so much going on. The smells, the sounds, the even the wildlife. There's so much going on.
I think so, and one of a great way to think about this, and again, it's an analogy. It's not necessarily what actually happens, but say you're out late at night practicing your spirit dance on the beach. And the weight of the moonlight on your shoulder pushes you around the corner. Yeah, that's a way to sort of summarize what's going on. It's probably not literally doing that, but it can influence you in a state of chillicity in these kind of ways. And another one, when we're talking about the activity of the moon as it goes around the earth, you sort of have that jag and meld going on with the moon as well, don't you, in terms of the tides? When some very high tides, you can have this very powerful swell in the sea. You can feel the power of jag and meld maintaining those big, can be dangerous waves. But you can be at the coast edge and you can still feel that swell that's going on within the sea. And so you're not experiencing the torrent of those ocean waves directly, but you can still feel it. You can still, although they're not hitting you directly, well, hopefully they're not, you might be in a bit of trouble, but you can still feel it and it can still influence you. And it's this kind of influence from nature that we're trying to open, as shamans, we're trying to open ourselves up to those, maybe subtle, maybe not so subtle. I'm not sure that they are that subtle. I think that we train ourselves from childhood through education and various other things. We train ourselves to kind of zone that stuff out or tune it out. And so what we're trying to do with our spirit dance is tune it in.
We
again.
don't consider them important, do we?
Yeah, exactly.
We focus in on a lot of things that we consider more beneficial to human progress and quote unquote human progress anyway.
Yeah. So that's Asaakh. And it's the appearance of new lines within your dance, but ideally you're not coming up with those lines. Nature is. And the more rich environment that you're dancing through, the easier it is for nature to, first of all, the more rich the environment you're dancing through, but also the more rich your weave is within the weave that you're creating in conjunction with the weave of that environment, the more rich those two things are, the more propensity is, the easier it is for nature to teach you through Asaakh. Yeah, that's
So
the idea.
let me do a Joseph Sikora sum up then. Try and get my head around Torrent and Kindle. So Torrent is about, you've got your energy thread, and it's about amplifying that energy thread. You move in that direction, and you provide the impetus to do that. Kindle, on the other hand,
I thought your turning up the volume on the amplifier was a great analogy.
Okay, we've got our energy thread, and we're turning the amplification up on that energy thread. Kindle is
nature is ideally it's nature that's turning the amplification up, not us. Yeah. So for instance, the example I gave with the heart, the heart rate naturally goes up. You're not saying, hey, heart, go faster. As you're getting more into your dance, your heart rate is just building. And if it's your heart rate driving the dance, then it will naturally build, right?
Yeah. Okay. And
that's Torrent. That's Tsotolun.
And Kindle is when or let's say new directions of movement present themselves. Kindle is when you allow those to manifest, and you allow those new movements to come into your dance. Those new directions, should I say, of the thread.
New energy, new threads, new energy, I mean, it could be just new energy introduced into a different thread. So here's an analogy. You're going through the forest with your eyes closed. You're in the Torrent position, and a tree comes up to your arm, say your right arm. The tree will naturally introduce that energy into you, because if you keep going forwards and you've got good structural trilicity, the tree will just swing you around itself. And that new impetus, that new energy thread, ultimately has come from the tree, not from you. And that's kind of the kind of thing that you want. That's a very dramatic example. Nature can give you much more subtle cues than that, much more subtle impetus than that. But that's a very obvious physical example of it.
So with a Joseph Sikora, very simple example, if you have your thread, if you just had Torrent, you'd be going in, the thread would just be in one direction, and that's it. You need the Kindle, the 2-in-1 pairing, to actually move, so the thread moves in the different directions.
Torrent doesn't matter. Torrent occurs no matter where the thread's going. It could be changing, could be moving, could be, but the building of it, the amplification of it, you sort of take more ownership of it, is another way to look at it. It can be a straight thread or it can be a curved thread, but it doesn't matter. It's the same kind of thing, because Torrent acts along the length of the thread. It doesn't work on the thread's path.
So whatever the thread's doing, it's amplifying that thread. Kindle comes along and goes, Kindle comes along and it's like, here's some new directions the thread can go in. Here's some new...
Not necessarily directions, but some new kind of energy, which is often a new direction. But it can be a new flavor.
Gotcha.
For instance, a splash, For instance, a splashing kind of aspect to it, or spiral. So some new kind of flavor. For instance, it was a circular thread and we turn it into a spiral thread. The thing that might turn the circle into the spiral would be Kindle.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, that has been fascinating. I might make a suggestion now and say we pause here and continue in the next episode on the last 4 energies. What do you think?
Yes.
I think there's a lot there
sounds
so
good,
far.
Mate. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, we'll probably have an endless discussion about Shard, not in a good way when we do get onto it. So yeah, let's do another one.
Yeah. Well, so in the next episode, we'll launch into the remaining 4 core energy changes. So I hope that's been really interesting. Damon, have you got any closing thoughts, or should we leave it there?
Just a quick practical exercise. Just get yourself a tree. It may be nice if you're a real nutcase shaman like me to get a tree with rough bark, but I recommend if you're starting off, get a tree with smooth bark. Make the Torrent position, put the tree up against your arm, and just walk forwards and allow the tree to turn you. Yeah, just do that as an exercise. Just get the idea that allowing the tree to turn you in your movement. Very, very simple. You just walk forward, the tree turns you. That's the idea.
Oh, cool. Okay, thanks a lot for listening, guys. If you head to your various podcast hosts that you listen to us on, then you can give us a 5-star, an honest review. 5 stars, if that is your honest review, of course. But it does help us get our podcast in front of other people, so that would be much appreciated. You can also head to patreon.com/wovenenergy and support us over there, where you can get extra resources, videos, bits and bobs that accompany this podcast as well. So you can head over there, and that would be much appreciated as well. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys, and we will see you on the next one.
Thanks a lot, guys.